Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Stacked Mentorship podcast, where we're here to talk all things sales, mentorship, and career development. On today's episode, I'm excited to be joined by Henry. Henry is a Stacked mentor. He has held every position in sales from SDR to account exec to VP of sales and everything in between. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, starting a career in sales, transitioning from IC to team lead, advice he has for young sales reps, and a lot more. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Henry, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much for having me, Omar. I appreciate it.
Amazing. So yeah, Henry, if you don't mind, I would absolutely love to go right back to the beginning. How did you get into sales? Why did you get into sales? And yeah, what was that first role like?
Yeah, of course. So being brutally honest, like most salespeople, I have a feeling that none of us really choose to go into sales. We kind of fall into it.
Yeah.
I was in my final year of university, and the two things I said I'd never do, one was sales and the other one was recruitment. And having been heads of department and running teams before, I've now done a lot of sales and a lot of recruiting. So I didn't really hold true to myself for my final year. But I graduated from university and went straight into a graduate program at a telecom company. My role there was pretty much an SDR, but it really developed me into all the different roles. So it was a organically grown company. It was 25 plus years old. So it meant that I learned everything from being an SDR and a BDR to being a SEM to being a partner manager. The only thing that it kind of lacked was that new business side. And I kind of did a number of years in telecoms from that side and grew into that new business side, doing enterprise business, and really learning every single department that I could possibly learn, and kind of really gearing myself up to moving into a new industry, which was eventually SaaS, and kind of further industries from there.
Interesting. Yeah. Also my experience as well, as just a final year grad ending up in a sales role. Interesting. And so starting off on that graduate scheme, I imagine, like you said, there was like you were exposed to quite a few different roles, but kind of going in the deep end, as it were, as this SDR, did you immediately know from day one, okay, like sales is for me, this is where I'm going to build my career? Did you kind of find it a little hard getting up to speed? What was this kind of like?
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem being completely honest. Like I've known you for a number of years now. I genuinely didn't think sales was for me. And I didn't think that sales was for me until about 3 or 4 years into my career in sales.
Oh, wow.
Sales is one of those things that is extremely difficult to do. And it takes a lot of mental resistance and resilience overall to get to being successful. And a lot of people kind of go into sales and you either have this natural ability and you pick it up straight away. And during my graduate scheme, I had plenty of friends who are like that, who just picked it up straight away. And then there are people who really have to learn. So kind of growing up, I was never the most outgoing person. I didn't really like to talk to random people. And I had this fear of, public speaking. And I've got a younger sister. She's of the Gen Z generation. Talking on the phone is a no-go. And now that I think about how I am now, I'm in a completely different place. Like I can happily walk up to someone random on the street and start a conversation. I was in Australia a couple of weeks ago and was starting random conversations with people while I was out there, just to learn more about like what Australia was like. And if I think back to, 21-year-old Henry going into my first sales role, it wasn't like that. I didn't understand how to build relationships. I didn't understand how to write a professional email. And like having been a sales leader and a mentor over the past couple of years, I kind of cut people some slack when they come out of university and they are that grad, because I remember being in that position of you're told exactly what to do from the age of, being in school up till graduating, where your timetable is set, your emails are set, everything is done for you pretty much. And picking up things from scratch is what going into the working world is. And that's what I felt like in sales. It took me a number of years to understand how to build those relationships, effectively kind of sell, effectively track, my numbers and my pipeline, and really just learning how to do sales as a function rather than just going in and start selling. Unfortunately, I'm one of these people who needs to know how everything works down to a T before actioning it. So it was a double-edged sword. I became very good at knowing the sales function and how to action it. But during those formative years of being in sales, I was not like the highest achiever. I hit targets, but I wouldn't be the one that was, sitting top of the President's Club, top 1% or anything like that. It took me a while to learn how to effectively do sales from that sense.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, like you said, everyone has a different answer, right? Like some people have just the personality type where they hit the ground running. But it's interesting, like you said, it's like kind of like the 3 to 4 year mark where you really kind of clicked. I imagine, especially as a entry level role coming out of Zurich, these would have been pretty formative years for you, right? I mean, these are, you're kind of put into the at the deep end, sorry. Like you said, it's not something that you immediately clicked with, but what was the kind of driving force that kind of pushed you through that 3 to 4 year mark versus, I don't know, you thinking, okay, I'm going to try another grad scheme or another role, something like that?
I definitely wanted to quit a couple of times during those first 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So even before university, I wanted to become a chef. So culinary school was always on the table, and going into that was a thing. But the thing that I loved about sales in those 3 or 4 years is, although I worked in telecoms for those first 3 or 4 years, I was working with different industries whilst in telecoms. And I realized that sales is kind of this gateway where, you know, you kind of do the same thing in terms of like calling and emailing and closing business, but you learn so
Mm,
much about different industries. And that's what I found interesting. So I could, one morning be speaking to a construction team about the internet and phone services. And in the afternoon, I could be speaking to a fashion company. And it meant that your world is always evolving. You're always learning about different industries and becoming a more well-rounded person. And even now, looking back at it, I wouldn't know as much as I do now if I hadn't stuck in sales and worked with those different industries. Not only that, but the strategy side of sales has always been very interesting to me, right?
mm,
I'm a numbers person when it comes to it. I like to know, look, what is my target? How many calls do I need to make? How many emails do I need to send? And what the op conversions are. And that's kind of what drove me, is that I knew in my head that, look, I, some people might disagree. I don't always think the best salespeople make the best managers. But in my mind, in those first 3 to 4 years, when I started understanding sales strategy and industry, I understood that I could be a very good manager and mentor when it came to it. So it was kind of I, working that grunt work for those first 3 or 4 years, learning the industries, learning how to do sales, because I wanted to help, people coming into the industry become better salespeople as well. Give them that extra boost that I didn't have and that support that I didn't have. So yeah, that's kind of what made me stick to it.
Interesting. And you mentioned something very interesting there. So a lot of people on our programs, um, maybe they are SDR who wants to become SDR manager. Maybe they are account exec, senior account exec who wants to become, I don't know, head of sales VP. Can you mention that, as you just mentioned, the difference in mindset? If you had to summarize the difference between IC and team leader, um, what does it take to go from, in your experience, the actual sales rep to the manager, and the difference in mindset that you just highlighted?
Yeah. So I think it is like a twofold thing. To be a good manager, you have to have experience being an IC. There is a number of times where, I've met managers who have gone straight in from being an SDR straight into an SDR manager. I never think that's the best progressive route, because being a good manager or senior sales leader, you need a broad overview of every single department. And this is something that I learned properly like 2 or 3 years ago when I picked up my first VP role. Is I knew loads about sales. I knew loads about business development, but I didn't know enough about, customer success, sales engineering, product marketing. And, in a week's time, I'm going to be starting a new head of sales role. And one of the first things I'm doing is doing cross-functional meetings to learn more about the other departments and what they need from the sales team. And I think that's the differentiator. When you're an IC, you can be very singularly focused. You only need to get the deal across the line, and then it goes off to CS. You only need to get it interested enough so you can bring in a sales engineer. And one of the things that I tried to do, and that's why maybe it took me a little bit longer, that 3 or 4 years, to learn about sales, was every single time I did a deal, I was heavily involved with how the sales engineering looked. Like, how is this deal going to fit together? What are the technical aspects that I need to learn? And then when it went over to the CS team, I learned what they needed from me as a salesperson. And, if there's additional information that can help deals move faster and close faster and get implemented faster, that was interesting to me. And then from an account management sense, what does the aftercare look like? And I think that's the defining difference. Is for those who want to become senior managers and go into management roles, we need to take the idea of, look, I'm a good IC, I'm good at doing my role, but how do we expand beyond that? What other areas do we need to look at? Do we need to look at where it passes on to, or do I need to kind of drill inwards to my own analytics to see how it affects me as a team? I think one of the key things that one of my original sales managers said was kind of, as a sales team or as a salesperson, you have to look at your role as a bigger chain of events, right? So you always want to learn what the person in front of you does, and the person behind you, you always need to teach them what your role is. And I'm 100% sure it was from a film. I can't remember what film it was from, but it's true, right? If you're an AE at the moment, you should be passing on all of that AE knowledge to an SDR so they can help book your meetings better, find the right people, find the right opportunities for you. And then from your front, you need to learn what a CSM does, or maybe a sales manager does, so that if you want to progress into a sales management role, you're going to need that CSM knowledge and you're going to need the sales manager knowledge, because your role as a manager is to kind of fill in those gaps between departments as well. So I think that's the big difference between being that IC and being that individual, and being that manager, which is bridging the gap between departments.
Interesting. And in terms of do you feel there's like a pretty even break in terms of personality, mindset? Can you tell now, as like a sales leader, someone who is cut out to transition to be the team lead, someone who's always going to be an IC? Because there's lots of people, lots of mentors that we have, lots of people who join the program who are ICs and do not have any vision of transitioning to team lead because they're just killing it as an account exec, whatever. That's their path. Others, like I mentioned earlier at the top of the question, who are thinking already, even at a young stage of their career, of becoming the team lead. Do you feel like a lot of this is just personality driven at the end of the day?
I think it's personality driven, but I also think there's like this romanticization about management, right? Everyone goes, I want to be a sales manager. I want to be a head of sales. I want to be a VP. And like, if you look at my track record of careers, that's exactly how I was from the very start. I progressed very quickly after those first 4 years into kind of leadership roles and management roles, because that was my goal. But it meant that my tenure at companies wasn't as long, because I was looking for these companies who were willing to take a chance on me so that I could fill in as that senior leadership role. I've learned a lot from that, but what I would say is that don't romanticize the idea about being a sales leader. There is a lot that you need to learn, and a lot that you need to take on board, and a lot more responsibility. And I know that if there are multiple sales leaders listening to this, we know that you don't make as much money as an IC because you're not closing the big deals. And it's kind of like more work for a pay cut. And realistically, people will think you're crazy when you say it in that term. But the way I look at it is, it's not a defining personality trait. I think it is your personal choice. Over the past couple of years, I've been bouncing back and forth of, do I want to be a sales leader or do I want to be an IC? Because I enjoy that hunter role and kind of being involved in deals and closing them. And the one thing that you need to remember is, whether you're an IC or a sales manager or a sales leader, you're doing the same thing. However, when you're a sales leader, you're not closing deals for yourself. You're closing deals with your team members to help them push it along. So you're kind of dealing with maybe 15, 20 deals at a time, rather than 2 or 3 at a time from a SaaS sense. And what I would say is, if you're the type of individual who wants to do the strategy side, really the management add-on is that strategy and development side. If you want to help pass on your knowledge and help people develop, that's the time when you start deciding that management might be a thing. And there's no reason why you need to fully commit to that. There were a number of roles where I was in IC where I would take on additional enablement roles. I would help SDRs, I would help AEs. And I feel like a lot of people stem away from that because they're like, oh, I'm taking on a job without the job title. The amount that I learned doing that type of role and teaching SDRs has resulted in me making not only like better bonds with people over time, but I still have SDRs, AEs that I've worked with in the past who still message me and go, look, Henry, I've got this deal. How do I work on this? Like, I have to turn around and be like, look, I'm not your manager, but if I was, this is how I would do it. Right. I think building those bonds are very important if you do want to progress into that management side of things, because eventually, if that individual is looking for work and you're looking to fill a role, they might be the perfect individual for you. And building out that network is very important. So I think that's the defining factor is, do you as an individual want to help progress other people's career and help on the strategy side? If you're only looking for the job titles to be like, look, I'm I've got the head of
Yeah.
sales role, I've got the VP role. It's not worth doing because it's so much more stress when you take on a role like that. And being completely candid, like there have been times when I have sat those roles where I'm like, man, I wish I was one of the ICs because all I would have to do is close business. There's equal amounts of stress, just in different ways, and there is no escaping it. Sales is just a stressful kind of job role to go into. So I feel like that's the best way to determine whether you want to be a manager or not. And I have friends who have been in sales 15, 20 years. They're still ICs. They're absolutely killing it. They've got summer homes and their homes like in their home country as well. And they absolutely love it. And you can do very well from being an IC in sales. And it's fully dependent on what you can kind of make of your career and what you want to make of your career. Do you want to go out and earn all the commission you can? Or do you want to go out and kind of build something from the ground upwards? I think that's definitely where you have those separate personalities filtering into.
Interesting. You mentioned a lot there, the importance of building these bonds, wanting to transfer your knowledge to other people in your team, especially more juniors. Could you summarize maybe the benefits that you received from having a mentor in your especially early roles, and then maybe the kind of mentorship that you give internally as you became a bit more of a senior figure?
So I think my early career, I had, especially my first company, I had a good kind of structure of mentors where previous graduates who have progressed on for, a year or two within the career would then mentor me. And they taught me everything from the basics of, how to deal with customers, like giving me ideas on how to work on certain deals, to how to write an email in certain cases when it was a difficult conversation. And one of the main things that I have learned overall is that, mentors are very important, because I only had it in that first company, and then progressing on, I spent a lot of time teaching myself and learning things for myself and asking a lot of questions. And if I had a mentor, I feel like I would have kind of had longer tenures in companies, for one thing, but really made sure that I learned everything and really grew within that company and was continuously growing within that company. And that's definitely something that I've taken on as a sales leader now and a mentor now, is that I understand that your investment in people is super important. All right. If you message me at 7 p.m. and you're on my team and trying to close a deal the last day of the month, I'm there with you. I'm going to help you close that deal because I know it's important for both of us. And in my mindset, it's kind of carrying on with that, right? The more that I put into the community around me, the more that they can see that they can rely on me. Like when you're looking at the professional world, it's mutual trust, right? Whatever you put into someone, they're going to give back to you. And when I'm doing mentoring, that's exactly what I like to see. So whether it's mentoring internally or externally, I'm going to teach you absolutely everything I can. I'm going to help you in every way I can without being that micromanager. I'm not here to tell you, how to write an email unless you ask me to.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
Yeah.
Anyone on my previous sales teams knows that. I'd rather them go out, make a mistake, and then come back and say, Henry, I've broke it. Can you come help fix it? And I'll come in and do that. And I think that's the balance you need to make. Is as a sales leader, I've had them past where they try and put mentoring, put kind of management in air quotes directly onto you, and it's not received because you haven't asked for it. Especially with teams where AEs and SDRs have maybe had the role for a number of years. They know the role and they will ask for help when they need help. You just need to show them that you are an open individual to offer that help, and you can be that responsible individual to help them whenever they need, whenever they ask. So that's the route that I've always taken. Is mentorship is important for everyone. Like if you're going to go out there, make sure you find someone who you can build a lifelong relationship with and ask advice from. Whether you're at the same company or not, it's good to be able to spitball ideas or even talk about career progressions. I still have AEs who come to me saying, look, this other company's reached out to me. What do I do? And we have a good conversation about it to make sure it's the right choice for them. I'm very invested in the mentees that I take on, especially like stacked mentees. I'm still speak to pretty much all of them on a regular basis, whether they send me a LinkedIn message or I send them a quick one, just see how they are. So find that mentor that you can kind of stick with and learn from over time. And then for those who are mentoring or managers, make sure that you're not forcefully managing people or mentoring them. Let them come to you, help them grow when they ask, and help them improve their skills rather than trying to throw your knowledge directly onto them.
Interesting. And to somebody who is maybe starting out their career, who is looking for a mentor, any top tips on finding a good mentor? Is it just a case of somebody who's walked the walk, has the experience, or is in the position you're looking for? Is there some more kind of soft skills you would look out for? Like you said, someone who has the personality type who wants to transfer knowledge, something like this. How does somebody find a good mentor?
So there's this really great company called Stacked, right? That
That wasn't the segue.
that was a great segue. This podcast is sponsored by Stacked. But no, seriously, the best way to find a good mentor is to find someone who is willing to be invested in you as an individual. It's very easy to find individuals who walk the walk and talk the talk. We've all seen the LinkedIn posts of last year I made $1 million and this is how I did it. Sign up to my podcast or sign up to my course and we'll teach you. You don't need to find people like that. The best people that I've found are either internally at companies where I've had the conversation about, look, how would you tackle these deals, or like, what advice do you have for me as someone in my position? Make sure that the person you're speaking to has worked the role that you've worked so that they have a relative idea of relative knowledge of the role. Outside of that, if you can't find someone internally, there is nothing wrong with reaching out to people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great community where we, in the majority, like to help each other. So I've had people who haven't come through the Stack program or haven't worked with me before, but have seen me LinkedIn post or seen me share something and connected with me and gone, can you help me with my CV? Can you give me some advice? I met a lovely individual a couple of months ago where she wanted to progress from being an accountant and being in the finance team at a really established construction and development company to going into tech sales. And having that conversation with them was about explaining what tech sales is actually like and showing them what that SDR role is. I've also had that similar thing from someone who was in the car sales industry going into tech industry. So all of them have the want to learn, and you want to find the individual mentors who will shape that as well. You want to help find someone who, one, has the previous knowledge, two, is going to be fully invested in you, and three, is going to help you build a kind of a pathway to what you require. And I think that's a big thing that I've learned from Stacked is my first ever kind of Stacked mentee, I kind of went in going, I'm going to teach them everything I know about sales. Okay. It's never going to happen because everyone learns differently. Everyone's selling a different product. Everyone has a different kind of view. But as a mentor, what I can do is share my views of how I have kind of tackled certain situations before. And anyone I mentor and anyone I've worked with, I kind of go with the whole fact that if you're coming to ask me about something, it's because I've done all the failures before. I know what doesn't work, and what I'm giving you is what has worked for me. And I'm not saying I'm 100% right. And I'm happy to preface, not in this podcast, but my whole career, I'm not the best salesperson in the world. I wish I was. I wish I was like a Tony Robbins and I was like a billionaire. It would be great. But I have been successful in kind of progressing my career, closing deals, working with big companies. And I think that's what you need to find in a mentor is someone who is willing to share the knowledge of their failures and open enough. If you're speaking to someone and they're like, no, I'm the best person in the world, I've hit 200% of my target every single year, they're probably not the best people to be teaching you because they might not have faced adversity when it comes to the sales world. And adversity is what you learn from. And my career has fully been startup, so adversity is something that I fully understand. I've never had a big logo to back me up going into deals. And I feel like that's what you need to take away is finding those individuals who have had those failures, who are willing to help you and shape your career in a way that you want, not the way that they see as correct.
Amazing. Final question, Henry, before I let you go. We've touched on it a couple of times throughout this podcast. What advice would you give to somebody who maybe is currently maybe a junior SDR, maybe they're mid-level account exec, they are currently in IC and they want to transition to becoming a team lead? Advice you would give them if they were to plan out, their next 6 to 12 months, basically, what should their strategy be to transition from IC to team lead?
So I definitely would start with shadowing someone internally at your own company. really understanding how that role works, not just on the surface level of, oh, they manage people, but everything like the figures they have to gather, the presentations they have to put together, the reporting they have to put together, and what their calendar looks like, and really understanding if the role that you want to go into is really for you. Like I previously working with like a stacked individual, she wanted to progress onto management. I was like, is management really what you want to do? She has since progressed into a more of a customer kind of success role at a company, and she enjoys it a lot more. And really what I would say is, if you don't have a mentor, go to the person who's doing the role that you want to do and really ask them, what do they love and hate about it, and get them to be honest. Whether it's in the workplace or you take them out for a drink afterwards and be like, look, this is completely off the books. I just need to learn what I'm getting myself into. Because there have been a number of times I've gone into a company and thought, look, this is the role for me, and done it and really struggled and not enjoyed it as much as I thought it was, just because on paper, on that job description, it sounds like a perfect fit. And what you need to do is make sure that job role is exactly what you want to do. Outside of that, if it is the job role you want to do, is definitely make that 6 to 12 month plan of, okay, in speaking to your own manager in the next 6 months, what would you need to achieve to progress on to a promotion? It doesn't have to be that specific role, but a promotion. And if there isn't a direct promotion route from what your role is, say if you're an SDR and you want to be, an AE manager, it's a very big jump because you haven't been an AE before.
Sure.
Is over that 12-month period, is do you need to have more experience past that 6-month period to get into that progression? I think the main thing I would say about promotions in general is SDRs, AEs, like any type of ICs going into management roles, everyone seems to just push for it over and over again. And I 100% am fully someone who can put my hands up and say I did it as well. Like I jumped from company to company because I wanted those bigger roles and I wanted to learn more. It's not always the best decision. I'm not saying 10 years of like 10 to 15 years is what you need to do, but rather than chasing after those like management roles and developing into those management roles, it's better to really understand your role and be the best SDR that you can be and learn everything that you can, so that when that SDR manager role, either internally or externally comes up that you want to do, comes up, you can go forward and say, look, I've achieved all of this as an SDR. This is everything I've learned about being an SDR, but also everything I've learned about the AE role and the CSM role internally from my company. Because as soon as you hit that management role, you're there to build structure. You're there to say, look, if I pass this lead on to the AEs, how does this look? And then how does it look down the funnel? You need to have that full knowledge. So rather than trying to jump into an SDR manager or an AE manager role and learning from scratch, start learning from when you're an SDR and an AE, because you're doing those deals and you can follow that path of that deal all the way through. And then when the time comes, just let it naturally happen. And if you really want to chase after those promotion roles and they're not there internally, there is nothing wrong with going to a different company and seeing if they'll hire you as an SDR manager. Again, this is just my advice, so don't hold me to it. I think it's better, from my own experience, to wait for the role to present itself. And if you're really struggling with your existing role and you want that promotion, then look outside. Like go and see if there is another role that might be a better fit for you that will give you that progression.
Amazing advice, Henry. I think we'll end on that note. If anyone wants to find you, I think you already mentioned in the podcast, LinkedIn, I think, is the best way to reach you. Is that correct?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or if you want to do any mentoring sessions, just reach out to Omar, and he'll put you in contact with me.
I appreciate the plug. Amazing, Henry. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Cheers, Omar. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Henry.